Dave Mitton. He has such an extensive biography. He's done so much that I have had to write it down, and I'm going to read some of the finer points.
Okay.
So Dave Mitton was born and raised on a dairy farm in New Brunswick. Dave's parents encouraged him to travel the world when he was young, and this he did, hitting almost all the continents, all the while picking up jobs in a bar, restaurant, and drinks industry. In 2001, Dave was ready and hit the Toronto restaurant and bar scene with a personal mission to put Toronto on the world's drinking map, along with New York, Mexico City, etc. With a friend, he opened Chahosky, which is another story of a restaurant, and it was a 4-story restaurant and bar and funhouse with music and so on, and it lasted about 10 years. And then he joined the renowned Corey Vitello at the Harbord Room. It was a lipstick pink hottest ticket in town, where Dave's cocktails were as big a draw as the kitchen. The Canadian Professional Bartenders Association had eyes on him and appointed him the president of the Ontario chapter. So Dave worked with many spirits brands, and about 10 years ago, he joined forces with Corby Spirit and Wine / Pernod Ricard brands. And they own some of the most iconic Canadian whiskey around, including Wiser's.
Yes.
Dave is modest, but I will tell you that he has won every single international award that there is. And in 2024, he was named Best International Brand Ambassador and Best Brand Ambassador.
Wow.
So that's really something high up in that industry. And here he is with us, and we're going to have a nice chat.
Hi, Sara and Adam. Well, I'm just here blushing from that introduction. Thank you very much, Sara. That was very kind of you.
What is a brand ambassador, and how do I get to be one? I think everyone would love to be a brand ambassador.
It's a great question. I mean, I get asked it at the airport, usually once or twice a week. It's pretty made up, global brand ambassador. It's kind of what you think it would be. I head up all the education and advocacy on our brands. So when Corby Spirit and Wine approached me 10 years ago, J.P. Wiser's had been around since the late 1850s. It was a well-known whiskey brand here in Canada. We were looking to launch it along with some of our other brands in the U.S. and overseas. And the Canadian whiskey category itself was a little misunderstood. So basically, we made up the position. I was fortunate enough to create my role. And it was going to be for a year or two. And here I am a decade later. I've just fallen in love with the challenge. But basically, I travel wherever we're sold. And sales teams will get bottles behind bars, onto shelves at spirit stores, into the hands of spirit experts. And basically, I have to come in afterwards and I have to engage and excite them about the category of Canadian whiskey and specifically our brands.
So what about when you're in countries that are known for whiskey, like Scotland or Japan? Do you travel there and try to sell Canadian whiskey there?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the UK is one of the better markets for us. For one of our brands, Lot 40, it's 100% rye whiskey. And it does so well there because it is unique. It's not going to take over sales of Scotch in Scotland or Irish whiskey in Ireland, but it's become very well respected. And Canadian whiskey is becoming more and more regarded as a premium whiskey over the years. We've been around since the mid-1800s, but haven't always been considered a fun whiskey like bourbon, or an exotic whiskey like Japanese whiskey, or a premium whiskey like Scotch. But the last 10 years or so, there's a lot of companies that have been raising the bar, and a lot of great spirit writers, whiskey writers embracing our national spirit. And we've been going up and up and up, and I hope that's going to continue.
And do people know Canadian whiskey as rye whiskey?
Well, I mean, you can get into a deep one on that. Like, if you think of Scotland has 5 categories of whiskey. Okay. Ireland has 4. United States of America has over 37.
What?
Canada has 1.
Oh.
So we are Canadian whiskey. We make it in quite a unique way where all of our grains are kept separate from the moment they show up at our distillery through production to the end, where we have, this is why Canada has master blenders. So all of our grains are fermented, distilled, and aged all in different ways, different types of casks. And then our master blender will create blends and expressions of whiskey.
So is that the substantive difference between Canadian whiskey and, let's say, bourbon, that everything is fermented separately and then blended at the end?
Yeah. So bourbon, like you say, out of the 37 categories in America, I think it's safe to say bourbon's probably the most popular. Mm-hmm. And bourbon, you say the distiller, he, she, or they're going to make the recipe as its grains. They'll put everything together. Yeah. They'll ferment that together. They'll distill it together. They'll age it together, and they put out a beautiful product. So yes, Canada is almost opposite, where corn, rye, wheat, and barley come into our distillery in Windsor, Ontario, and all of it's produced separately. So it could be distilled in different ways to concentrate up flavors or take them away. The different types of casks will accentuate different flavors, different amounts of time. Our terroir is a very big deal. We have to age a minimum of 3 years to be called a Canadian whiskey. Sara, I heard, is drinking our oldest on the market right now, the 42-year-old. Very nice to hear that. Thank you. And our master blender can take all of these separate distillates and create all these beautiful expressions of whiskey.
That's amazing.
You know, yeah. I want to tell you something. I grew up in Winnipeg, where whiskey was whiskey. You know, one thing.
Yep.
And when my dad was in his 80s and he was retired, and, you know, he had his minor disabilities, and he came to live with us. And every morning after breakfast, he filled up a water glass with whiskey. And I used to buy him the best that I could. And he would sip all day. Just sip. And by dinner, he was in such a great mood. And then after dinner, he'd go to bed. So that was his enjoyment, to have a glass of whiskey just there for him, because he always drank whiskey, as all his friends did when they came to our house. You know, when people used to entertain at home in those days, there would be a few bottles of whiskey. There was no scotch or vodka or gin or something like that. In Winnipeg, it was Canadian whiskey.
Absolutely. And I think it's still safe to say, you look at sales across Canada, I mean, Ontario, the prairies, the Alberta, like, Canadian whiskey is very large there. I mean, it's large everywhere. In Maritimes, where I grew up, it might be a little more rum forward, might be a little more wine forward in Quebec, maybe even gin forward in British Columbia. But Canadian whiskey, it still outsells everything here. It's a lot of national pride, I think, especially these days.
I have a couple of statistics for you that of all the whiskey that's produced in Canada, 15% is consumed in Canada. 85% of Canadian whiskey is exported and consumed internationally. And the sales of Canadian whiskey contribute almost $6 billion to the Canadian economy. And I don't think people know, I don't think it's general knowledge, how integral the whiskey industry was to the foundation and formation of Canada. You know,
100%.
Yeah, whiskey and fur.
The first 5 taxpayers in Canada, and we didn't pay taxes for 10 years after we'd become a country in 1867. But the first 5 taxpayers were Canadian whiskey producers. The first taxpayers were the Gooderham and Worts distillery in downtown Toronto. The first year they paid taxes, they had to pay out $1.5 million.
Oh, my goodness.
Back in the mid 1800s, late 1800s. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You look at Gooderham and Worts, for all of us that live in Toronto, they were the starting of building our railroads locally. They built some of our most important red brick buildings, our churches, Little Trinity Church, the Flatiron building in Toronto. That's Gooderham and Worts. Most people, we don't learn it in school growing up, but Gooderham and Worts had so much to do with building our city and our country. They were on our currency at one point.
Really?
Gooderham was one of Toronto's mayors at one point. Like, the Gooderham and Worts had so much to do with the building of Toronto, and that's Canadian whiskey.
There should be a course, or at least a chapter of a book in Canadian history in high school about whiskey, because it really is the spirit of Canada. And I don't know if it was Gooderham Worts or Hiram Walker that contributed to John A. Macdonald's campaign, and then Wilfrid Laurier's campaign. So they were vital, within Canadian politics as well.
Absolutely. Henry Corby was a politician for a while. Like you say, you name some of the original producers of Canadian whiskey, and they had their hands in everything. Like, they were making whiskey before we were actually a country.
Yeah.
They had a lot to do with building and forming of the country. Think of it this way. Our distillery currently has 1.6 million barrels laying down at all times. And those are worth $1,000 in tax each to the Canadian government.
Wow. Are you doing, is there anything new on the horizon? Like, I know with Wiser's, there's often something new. Like, what I'm drinking was new when I first bought it, but I'm still clinging to it. And I think it's interesting whenever the blender comes up with a different cask or a different essence.
There will be 100%. And Dr. Don, he's our master blender, Don Livermore. He's actually has his PhD in brewing and distilling out of Harriet Watt in Edinburgh. So he actually is a doctor. It's not just a little nickname. Bless you. So, last year there was a focus on more age statements with the 42-year-old that Sarah's drinking. We did a 28-year-old and some other variations going down to the U.S. What I'm able to say right now is this coming year, before the end of this year and next year, you're going to see some really fun barrel finishes coming from some JP Wisers and some of our Lot 40. There's some pretty interesting stuff coming out that I've been fortunate enough to try, but I don't think I'm allowed to say it out loud what will be coming as of yet, because Spirit, like LCBOs, SAQs, it's a whole procedure. You have to go through the red tape. They have to accept it, and then it's on shelves. I think it's all done, but JP Wisers has some fun stuff coming out this year. Let's put it that way. Some really things.
What's always really fun is the tours. I went on a tour. I drove out to Windsor, and I had a lot of fun touring the distillery there and trying different samples. That's like, I think it's a signature Ontario experience, or at least it's one that should be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most people don't even realize, like you say, we've been there. Hiram Walker was an actual gentleman from the city of Detroit. He was a grocer that rumors of civil war and prohibition in the USA, he wanted to open his own distillery, but he wasn't going to do it in the US with the possibility of civil war breaking out and people not being allowed to buy whiskey. So he built the distillery across the river in Canada. He was the first commuter. And we've been producing whiskey there since 1857. And most people don't realize what's unique about it is, I won't say we are but but we are probably top 3 of largest distilleries in North America.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say by square footage we are. So it is a big industrial plant, but there's a smaller, more artisanal side to it as well.
Yeah.
With some of our smaller brands that we make, but it's quite an impressive sight to see.
But how brilliant is that? You know, you live in Detroit, you know what's coming, you know that you can't open up a distillery there, so you just go across the river and become Canadian.
Just that simple. Like, times were a lot different back then.
So what's happening now? Do the tariffs and this whole trade war, does this benefit Canadian whiskey, or is it hurting it? What's your view on that?
Well, I think this is going to hurt everybody in the long run, but I mean, it's simple math right now where most provinces aren't selling American whiskey. Canadian whiskey sales are definitely going up.
Yeah. And is Canadian whiskey, is it different than Canadian wines where you can't really get BC wines in Ontario or vice versa? But with Canadian whiskey, I think, is there a different standard that you can have cross-provincial trade of whiskey?
If you think of like the big eight distilleries, all the big brand names we know, those are readily available across the country.
Yeah.
And then if you pick up some books like Spirits of Canada by Christine Sisimondo or Stephen Beaumont, or the Distillery Guide by Davin DeCurgamo and Blair Phillips, it'll show they've reviewed maybe close to the 300 artisanal boutique distilleries across the country.
Yeah, Davin is amazing. He's an encyclopedia of whiskey, and he's written for us.
Yeah, he's always been there for me. He's been a great guy since I started this role over the last decade. And unfortunately, I think it's almost the amount that these distilleries produce that is why they're not leaving their provinces. For instance, it's kind of like wines in Ontario or British Columbia, there's not always enough to go around to spread out.
Yeah. Well, certainly with BC wines, they sell out in the Vancouver restaurants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are some smaller distilleries that are across the country, or there would be some really boutique niche ones that I've had the pleasure of trying their whiskey, and they'll even usually be sold out in their own province because they don't make that much and it just goes overnight.
Wow.
You know, I have a neighbor in my building, and he was going home to Pakistan for Christmas. And he said to me, "What should I take as a gift?" I said, "Take Canadian whiskey." And I had a new bottle of Lot 40.
Great.
And that was a big hit in Pakistan, I have to tell you.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Yeah, that big 100% rye, we noticed we're not everywhere yet. We're probably in 20 different countries, but kind of overseas markets are really enjoying that big, bold rye compared to the softer corn.
Mm-hmm. I was looking for that Lot 40.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Went to Pakistan.
That's all right.
Luckily, there's plenty of it. You'll always be able to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what would you say, what about cocktail pairing? You know, sometimes it seems that cocktails are becoming much more fruit forward. And I don't know how accommodating whiskey is compared to the lighter spirits like a vodka or a gin. How would you, I mean, you obviously are the one to ask about whiskey and cocktails.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can think of it this way, like from the style of whiskey, I mean, all the flavors being concentrated up or taken away from the way you distill, from the grain of the yeast to the type of barrel it's being finished in. You know, if you've got something like our JP Weiser's 10-year-old, that's going to be that soft, rich corn, more lean, but you get the baking spices of the rye added into it. That's something you're going to do more kind of tall and refreshing drinks. Like it could be as simple as a highball, or a lot of people like it with a Boilermaker in the summertime with the nice local beer. you'll see it paired up in the fall months with like apples, like apple cider mixed into it. You think of that kind of fall flavors. Or like you say, the Lot 40 you were just talking about, that big 100% rye. You're not going to do much better when it's making an old fashioned or a Manhattan with that straight rye whiskey. But this is the one we see bartenders playing around with. I was at Simple Things for brunch today, and Evelyn, the owner, who does some of the best cocktails in the city, was talking about maybe doing something with rhubarb and the 40, because all those baking spices, and there's rich mint notes to it and florals. There's an elegance and delicate side to it that you'll see a lot of bartenders mixing with sherries and citrus and bubbles and making seasonal drinks with it. So it's quite versatile, to be honest.
You have to send me some recipes just for fun.
Oh, absolutely, I will. Fun ones to make at home.
Yeah.
And what about food pairings?
Great question. I mean, food pairing is always a little tougher. I did a whiskey dinner at True Wild Distilling 3 weeks ago in Calgary, and we had a lot of fun with it. The team there put out some incredible dishes. We brought in some of our whiskeys from the distillery. I mean, you could think of it like a lot of our whiskeys will really go well with seafood. And you think of it too, like a lot of people will use some of our like our Lot 40 Dark Oak to go with oysters. And I know with oysters, you'll think Scotch a lot of the time, or vodkas, but it works really well. I mean, heavy hearty meat is something that just comes across, but also desserts. Like when I'm in the UK, someone's always making me a Lot 40 something to go with sticky toffee pudding.
Yeah.
And I'm never disappointed.
That's how I'm familiar with it is, with desserts or, in cooking, a splash of something, especially if there's something with brown sugar seems to pair well with it. But I think, Mom, you've used it sometimes with steak.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I'm making a fillet in an iron pan, and I put on the pepper, and then just to finish, some Lot 40.
I love that.
And then just for a few seconds, and then into the plate. It's good.
I love that. Well, our master blender would like that because he always talks about the circle of life with Lot 40, where farmers in Ontario grow all the grain for us. We buy the grain from them. We produce whiskey with it. When we're done making the whiskey, it's full of all kinds of protein, so we sell it back to the farmers as feed for their livestock. So it really is a full circle of life. Great for business, very good sustainable practice.
Happy cows.
Happy cows, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So Don always thinks, he's like, if you see Don having a steak and a whiskey, he'll talk about the circle of life of how that whiskey could have been made from the grains that fed this cow, and it's pretty interesting.
So, Dave, we just have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask you, what's next for you and what's next for Wisers? What can we look forward to on the horizon?
For myself, there's a few things on the horizon that I hope I'll be able to share in the next half a year or so. Working on some personal projects outside of this. I love this role, though, and I don't ever want to leave it. I think the next thing is we're seeing Canadian whiskey really start to grow. It's been doing well for us in the US and Europe, and we're starting to see people from more countries in South America or Asia reach out to us because they're interested in bringing in Canadian whiskey and selling it.
Oh,
so there is a want and need. I don't know how much, because if a market reaches out to us, we'll hear them out, hear their plans to sell us. But we're starting to branch out. Canadian whiskey is starting to get a lot more respect and excitement around the category. So I'm hoping the next few years.
And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, I really like bourbon. and bourbon can be quite a dynamic whiskey, but with Canadian whiskey, there's such a range. It's such a versatile product that even just at Wiser's alone, you have quite a portfolio of different kinds of whiskeys to appeal to different palates. So that in itself is something to be proud of, that a taste of Canada in each bottle could be completely different, which is also truly reflective of our country.
Yep. Very diverse. I like that. That's great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more or put it better myself.
All right. Well, maybe I could be your brand ambassador sidekick.
We'll definitely have some drinks together. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate your time, and I'm wishing you all the best with all your endeavors coming up.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me. It was a blast. And Sarah, I'm going to send you some cocktail recipes to enjoy at home.
Thank
And
you.
I will hold you to that, Mom. You're going to make them for me.
I will.
All right.